I truly believe we would be out of business right now if we had raised money.
Welcome to Top CEO. I'm chatting with Mike Salguero, founder and CEO of ButcherBox.
I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't think that this was going to be like my thing. We grew stupidly fast. I'm no genius. We got very lucky. Our timing was great. Our team was great. We don't have a value of like grow at all costs. We have a value of being member obsessed. We're going to make sure that you have the highest quality product, and then we stand behind it.
I think lots of people try to do that. Sometimes it's difficult because they have trouble delivering what they said they were going to do.
I think too many people fall in the trap of like a lot of planning and not a lot of action. You are nothing if you're not known for keeping your word. There is a lie that is pervasive in entrepreneurship right now. And that lie is that
You started the company in 2015. It seems like that notion of the values of the company is important, not only because it helps you run the company, but because it was part of the founding idea of ButcherBox. So take us through back, like how that came to be, how you came to be a purveyor of a subscription meat business, and how that relates to those values.
So I had run a company before this for 8 years. We were venture-backed, raised about $30 million of financing, and the business didn't work, and we ended up losing everyone's money.
What was the business?
The business was called custommade.com, and it was a marketplace for custom stuff. We raised money from Google, First Round Capital, Accomplice, and others.
And say custom stuff, but what are we talking about here?
Like furniture and jewelry, mostly.
Okay, so custom-made furniture and jewelry, kind of bespoke things you were doing at scale. You raised a bunch of money to do it.
Yeah, we were like Upwork, but for custom stuff. So you would like say what you're looking for. We'd find you makers. They'd bid on the work. You'd pay them through our platform, hire them through our platform, and watch them make it through our platform. We bought a website that was built in 1996. We were a subscription business for a few years, and then we pivoted to a marketplace concept. And I learned a lot in that experience, and I was fortunate to be able to raise money and have investors. But when I started ButcherBox, so I basically we let everyone go. We wound down the company, and 3 days later, I started ButcherBox. And ButcherBox had been a hobby for me. I was my wife and I were trying to clean up our diets and eat grass-fed beef, and we couldn't find it. So I started like talking to farmers and bought beef from farmers, and then it was too much meat, so I sold some to my friends, and just kind of like stumbled into this like world of, hey, I want to eat more consciously raised meat. How do I do that? And then I decided I was going to start a hobby business, like a subscription business, where I was going to have a few thousand subscribers. And if I made a little bit of money off them every month, like, great, I could cover my expenses and have a nice little business on my hands.
And was that intended to be your like full-time occupation, or is this like side hustle? I have a personal interest.
Side hustle. This was like the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, like build a side hustle that covers your nut and then go figure out something else to do. I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't think that this was going to be like my thing. I wanted to build a big company, but I was like, I didn't think this was going to be the company. And we started with a Kickstarter campaign. So I worked from May until September, launched in September. And again, it was like, well, let me just de-risk this. Like, I'm sure no one's actually going to want to purchase this, but let me see. And we went out to raise 25 grand and raised 215 grand. And then things just started to snowball.
Was the Kickstarter, I mean, people, do Kickstarter or sort of crowdfunding for different reasons. Some people do it to actually raise the money to do it. Some people do it for, it's marketing. You bring people in, you give people a stake in it. What was the thought for you? What was the purpose of the crowdfunding?
Well, Kickstarter, you don't actually give people a stake in it. It's a pre-selling platform. So
what I meant is like a stake, like, they're pulling for you in your business. They're like, oh, I knew, ButcherBox when. Was that part of the strategy then?
The belief was that we could game it. So the belief was that we could put in small amounts of dollars and then have a large return on those dollars. And so we basically tried to reverse engineer like how Kickstarter worked and how they got there was this verified badge. And once you were Kickstarter verified, you showed up on the homepage, you showed up in emails, all these doors unlocked for you. And so we basically were like, let's just try to get Kickstarter verified. And if we can, then they'll do a bunch of sales for us. And the idea was, it was a pre-selling, because what I didn't want to do was launch a website with a whole bunch of inventory sitting on a freezer, because I didn't raise any money. So the idea was, okay, let me see if I can sell some boxes, which we did. We sold like 1,000 boxes. And then let's build the inventory, because people on Kickstarter are used to like waiting 6 months to receive something. In our case, they waited 2 weeks. So once I saw the orders come in, then we started cutting the meat and shipping it out. And then we had an immediate customer base to then go back to and get onto a subscription. And so what it did is we pre-sold a lot, which infused the company with cash and with pre-orders that then we were able to ride as we built out like a business without raising money. So I put 10 grand into the business, and that's the only money that's ever been into the business.
I think lots of people try to do that. Sometimes it's difficult because they either have trouble delivering what they said they were going to do. So it sounds like you had that set up, or they have trouble converting it into a business, meaning it's a successful Kickstarter campaign, and then it doesn't translate into subscriptions or things like that. So had you thought all of that through, or were you just kind of adjusting as you go and based on the response?
No. So I don't really put a lot of credence into having big fancy plans, because I think oftentimes like doors open that you weren't expecting to be open. So no, I didn't think through like what's going to happen. It was kind of like, one, is the Kickstarter going to be successful? Within 3 days, it was like, okay, this is going to be successful. Then it was like, okay, cool. We're going to ship out these boxes. Let's hire an intern to come in and pound the phones and try to get like, hey, how's it going? Have you cooked anything? Do you want to be a subscriber? Cool. That worked. 30% of people like rolled to a subscription. And then, it's just like you learn and you just keep moving. You just keep moving. It's not about, I think too many people fall in the trap of like a lot of planning and not a lot of action. And I believe that you act, you pick up on signals, and then you plan accordingly is a much better strategy.
Lots of entrepreneurs, including ones listening to the show, might be like, you search, you're sort of grasping, I don't know how else to say it, like grasping in the darkness for product market fit, right? You're like trying to find that before you don't have it. You're trying a bunch of stuff, you have theories. And what happens is, as you're going through that process, is a lot of times, you can, there's tons of companies like execute perfectly, really great CEOs, and they don't make it because they don't quite get the important stuff right. And they get a lot of stuff right, but not like the critical pieces. And there are other companies that get a ton of stuff wrong, but can actually still grow because they get like the critical things right. So what did you get right, do you think? And do you feel like you executed perfectly on all the other stuff, or was it just that you got these things right that were the critical things?
Hell no, definitely not. No, I mean we got lucky, and I would say the number one decision that we made was to not raise money. Like if you look back at our growth, what we did, the channels we opened up, none of that we would have found if we had gone out and raised money.
You think you would have been, even though you would have had more money, you would have done less well as a business overall if you had raised?
I truly believe we would be out of business right now if we had raised money.
Because you wouldn't have been laser focused on profitability from the start, and you would have just been like looking for market share and spending a ton. Is that why, or is it some other reason?
So we started in 2015, and 2015 Blue Apron was like the darling, and had raised at a $2 billion valuation, and there was like at least 75 Blue Apron lookalikes out there. By 2017, so if we had raised, we'd be like out raising money in the summer of 17.
And you would have been thought of as like, oh, we're the Blue Apron of meat or something. People would have called you that, right? You would have been pigeonholed in that.
Which they did, yeah. Summer of 17, Blue Apron goes public and their stock craters. And what happened was all the venture capital in the box subscription food space dried up immediately. And so for 17, 18, 19, basically up until COVID, there was no money for people who were in box subscription companies, and they all went out of business. So the only ones left are like HelloFresh, Blue Apron just got bought. Like that was it. But before, if you remember in 15 and 16, there was like tons of these. They were all advertising against each other with different deals on Facebook. And so it actually opened this path where there was all of a sudden nobody in this space, and we just went into that space. And so if we had raised money, we would have built a non-profitable acquisition channel on Facebook, trying to leverage Facebook, hoping for the best with LTV. And we would have been out raising money in 2017, right as Blue Apron was collapsing, and people would have said no to us, and I'd be like not working on ButcherBox. I mean, that's obviously a story. Who knows what would have happened? But I think that like the critical, the most, and also our approach. So we started with a subscription. People in meat were like, subscription? Nobody's going to do subscription. And I was like, I want a subscription because once you get a customer, you can keep them going. So it's like a profitable business.
You're thinking because the counterpoint at that point was something like, you'd always see like Omaha steaks during the holidays and get this like holiday thing and that's it. And then that was the model.
The other thing is we had a curated box. So you would order, we don't do this currently, but well, we do it for some people, but you would order like, I want beef and chicken. And then we would decide what to send you. Right. And I did that because I didn't want a lot of inventory. Because if you're like, oh, I think we're going to have 1,000 ribeye sales, let me put up 1,000 ribeyes in inventory. That's cash sitting in your freezer. Can't do that if you raise money. So or if you didn't raise money. So we built a whole scenario where like you would get a beef and chicken box, you didn't know what was showing up, and we would send you whatever we wanted to, because then we could basically build it in real time and ship it out. That unlocked a whole bunch of stuff for us. And like, so literally we stumbled into like a product market fit because we made the decision not to raise money. And I wasn't like some genius on it. It was like I raised money. We did 5 rounds of financing. We raised $30 million, and I just didn't like the way that I was treated, and I thought that the company suffered as a result.
Sometimes entrepreneurs are surprised by this, and we have a lot of clients who are founders of companies. That when you raise outside money, like a lot of people get into being an entrepreneur because they don't want to work for someone else. And then you raise money and it feels like you work for someone else. Did you experience that? Did it feel like that?
Hell yes. My number one piece of advice to entrepreneurs, people who are like wanting to start a company, thinking about starting a company, or you have started a company. I think that people spend way too much time on a business plan. Oh, how's this going to work? What's the revenue model? What are our channels? What do we do if those channels don't work? Like the whole business plan. They spend no time on what I call a lifestyle plan. And what I encourage anyone who comes to talk to me about, like, how do I start a company, is to do a visioning exercise. Think of yourself 3 years in the future and describe your day. What does it look like? Are you waking up at home? Are you hanging out with your kids in the morning? You taking them to school and then going to work? Are you traveling? Are you like speaking? Are you in an office? Are you not in an office? What does your office look like? Like, just let your heart like kind of write a day of like a creative writing exercise of your perfect day, and then build a business that powers that. The best entrepreneurs I know have really strong boundaries in between like what they want personally and family and health, and how their business helps support that. And I think what happens is people are like, oh, well, I have this great idea, and so I'm just going to become like a slave to my idea. And the problem with that is you don't realize you're going to wake up. This is exactly what happened to me. I woke up 7 years into running a business. I had poor health. I didn't have a lot of friends left. I had lost the culture of the company because my VCs told me I should hire people that like weren't the right fit for the company. I didn't even want to get out of my car to come into work. And I had worked myself into a job where I had a whole bunch of bosses being all of my investors, and I was miserable. And like, but in the moment, you're like, well, I need to do whatever it takes for the company. And the reality is you don't. Like, start with what you want out of your life and then work backwards. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to be a slave to your company.
There was this famous, I think, psychological study. They took 2 groups of students, and they were all new art students, and it was all about who could do the best sculptures. And they said to one group, go work on one sculpture for the semester. Make sure it's your best one. You're going to be graded on this. And then the other group, they said, you know what, you're going to be graded based on quantity. So just like make, however much art you can make, that's what you're going to be graded on. And what was interesting about this study was that, of course, the people who had quantity made a lot of it, but they also made the highest quality art as well, because they had so many iterations, so much output that they learned from. They just got better versus the people that were trying to be perfect.
Yeah, and that's the like I think first of all, in order to bootstrap a company, you need to be really careful about spending money. Right? Because you don't have any money. Like, that's the only way it works. You can't you can't bootstrap, quote unquote bootstrap, and then spend money like you're a funded company. That doesn't work that way. Like if you're going to bootstrap, you got to be like dedicated to bootstrapping. And one of the things about bootstrapping is like, to your point on like the sculptures, with bootstrapping, you need to make sure that you are focused on making money. Like that's important. It means you need to make profit on the customers that are coming in. You need to be watching how much it costs to service those customers. And you need to like follow the things that make you money. And I think that, in our case, it was like, okay, we're going to do Kickstarter. Okay, that worked. We made some money. Great. What's next? All right. Well, this thing, it was influencers, but during our Kickstarter campaign, we noticed some people were tweeting about us, and like there was a lot of activity as a result of those people tweeting. And these people were influencers, like diet people. So we reached out to all the diet people. We're like, can you promote our product? And then it just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And, we're constantly just refining and focusing and making sure we're not spending a lot of money, because if you spend a lot of money, you can't bootstrap until you like figured out a path to profitability.
At what point did this you start realizing, like take us through what happens after you sign up those 30% sign over subscriptions? What kind of business did you have? And you start thinking this isn't maybe like my side hustle so that I can figure out the next thing. This is my main hustle.
Yeah. I mean, so we grew like stupidly fast. So the first year we did 215,000 in the Kickstarter, and then another like 75 grand. So we finished the year, having started in September, at $300,000. The next year we did 5 million. The year after we did 33 million. The year after we did 105 million. So it was like 5, 30, 100, and then 220. And then COVID hit, and we went from 220 to 450. And then 450 to 550, and like we've kept going. So we grew stupidly fast. And look, like I'm no genius. We got very lucky. Our timing was great. Our team was great. Like COVID happened. Like a lot of stuff fell in our favor. But we knew pretty quickly. Like maybe not in the first. The first part was like, oh wow, people are like signing up. They seem to like this. This is cool. And then it was like, we got to 5 million. It's like, okay, there's something here. And then it was like 30 million. It was like, oh my God, like this is like a real thing. And I kept saying, which I think is like important for people to know, because a lot of people who listen to the show are probably like looking to start a company or run a company or currently running a company. I, throughout the entire thing, was like, oh, once it gets to like X, I'm not going to be able to run this anymore. So I remember the first thing was like, once we do like $1 million a month, like I'm not the right CEO. I'm a failure. Like I'm not the right guy. And then it was like, once we got to $1 million a month, and I had like a mentor working with me, he's like, you should set your sights higher. I was like, okay, fine. Once we get to like $100 million, I'm not the right guy for this job. And then, I hit 100 million. It's like, okay. So you're constantly like dealing with the own head trash that you have about like, how good are you at this role? But the thing I say about ButcherBox is like, I did not expect this to be a $500 million company, like changing the lives of millions of households in this country who are eating ButcherBox. I expected this to be like maybe 10,000 subscribers, maybe $1 million in revenue, and like I did not expect what ButcherBox wanted to become was very different than what I had thought it would become. And when COVID hit, we were actually pretty early on COVID. I was watching a lot of the kind of fringe news outlets that were talking about this, this disease that was happening or this virus that was spreading. And I had a friend who lived in China, and she couldn't get back in the country, and the factory shut down. So very early on, I had notified the team, like, let's load up an inventory. I think something's coming. I had no idea like how much demand would change, but I did think factories were going to slow down or shut down, and that was going to be a problem. So we were like as well prepared for COVID as possible. And yet, I remember it was St. Patrick's Day of 2020. And we were just like, we stopped marketing altogether, and just orders were just flying in. And if you remember, that's when you were going to grocery stores and there was like no meat left on the shelf.
When this starts happening, what were your emotions like? Do you remember there's one TV commercial where like people are all excited when the sales start? I forget what the commercial was for like a website builder or something like that, where like sales are coming in, you're like the office is cheering, and then it keeps going even more. They're cheering more, and suddenly it keeps going. They're like, uh-oh, what are we going to do? Like, was that what it was like? Or what was the emotional ride as you sort of saw these orders coming in?
Yeah, it was pretty well. First of all, I had COVID at the time, so I was also nursing a really bad cough and fever. And at that point, you didn't even know, like, was it going to kill me? So, but yes, it started off as like, wow, this is really cool, and then it was like, okay, we just need to we started just removing everything from our website that was like a promotion or was like, made it easier for people to purchase or anything. We were just like, get rid of all of that. And maybe it was probably 5 to 10x a normal day is what we were signing up. And we knew, because we had found pockets of growth before. So we knew that we needed to hold on for as long as possible. Like when a big wave comes, you're like waiting for that perfect wave. And when that wave comes, you want to ride that thing for as long as you can before you like topple into the water. And so, it was more like, yeah, we're going to sign up as many people as we can. This is great. We're like, keep going, keep going, keep going. We lasted about 2 weeks, and then we had to basically shut down our website and not allow anyone else to sign up. And the reason why was because we basically also saw all of our current members move their ordering in. They were like, I want a box right now, because they couldn't get meat. And so there was just a run on our freezers. And in order to make sure that there was enough meat for our members, to make sure that they weren't going to have to go to the grocery store, we decided to put everyone on a wait list and not sign up any new subscribers, which is a pretty big decision to make.
A growth-oriented CEO founder. You've grown the company with the explicit goal of not taking outside money, bootstrapping. Everything you do is about like, how do I create more demand? And particularly if you're direct to consumer, right? So you're not as much encountering people are just going to encounter you, right? You're trying to reach people. Then you're getting all this. Is it painful to do it, even though you're thinking to yourself like, this is the right thing to do? We should service our own customers. Was it difficult just because of the emotion of it, of like everything you're doing is get more of this, and now you're saying, I want the opposite?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a deep believer in core values. That companies like, and if you're a CEO, you really need to understand what the core values are of the company, or architect those core values, and then make sure that you're adhering to them. I like to say a value is not a value unless it's defended. One of our core values is being member obsessed. We don't have a value of like grow at all costs. We have a value of being member obsessed. And what I told the team was like, yeah, it sucks, but I don't want to have to go to a grocery store right now to buy my own meat, because we ran out. And I bet there are a whole bunch of our customers who are in the same boat. So we're just like, it actually made it really, it was a pretty easy decision to make, because it was the right thing for our members. And to this day, I get thank yous from members who are like, you were there for me during COVID. I'll stay with you forever. You prioritized us instead of like growth.
Do people realize that decision? Or, because I mean, I get entrepreneurs would understand.
Yeah, we sent an email to our audience being like, we are not going to grow anymore because we want to make sure that you have enough meat. So we took the attaboy from our membership. And it was very, very well received. People really, really respected that we did that at a time when we could have just added a lot more people and left our members looking for meat.
How big a decision was that, like, in terms of dollars? Do you have a sense of how many subscriptions you kind of had to leave on the table?
Left on the table? Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know how things would have turned out. I mean, to be honest, it could have, maybe we would have grown a lot more, but maybe we would have lost a lot more people because they're like, screw these guys. They don't like at a time of need. They didn't, they weren't there for me.
There's one sense, which is like, let's turn off incoming orders. We're going to satisfy our existing customers, but you also have to satisfy your existing customers, and there's supply chain shortages, and it's harder to get things, and people may be sold out, and you've got to, and also there's other issues because you're positioning yourself as a premium product, which means that I'm not just expecting, a steak. I'm expecting a steak that is worthy of buying a subscription service that I can't get at my supermarket. So what was happening behind the scenes to make sure that, man, you don't just kill the new coming business, but then the people end up upset anyway because they're not getting either the quality or the delivery or the service or whatever it is that they're used to expecting?
No, yeah. I mean, so in terms of the meat itself, we would never, and a lot of companies have done this. We would never do this. We would never like try to do a bait and switch, like, oh, we'll give you something different because that's like better. Like we had to make sure that the people that we work with are adhering to our standards, even throughout a very difficult time. We did have to like, for example, for a while there was like very little chicken. So people who had chicken in their box were like, look, we don't have any chicken. Do you want to replace it with this? Do you want to replace it with this? Like giving them options so that they're not like, where's my chicken? But we knew that we couldn't stray from like our claims because that's our brand. Like our brand, like what we stand for, like from me all the way down to what we deliver to the customer is we obsess over the details. We're going to make sure that you have the highest quality product, and then we stand behind it. And like there's nothing that could have happened that would have forced us to like that would have encouraged us to like make that move. We just never would do that.
Well, and do you think that you would have had the success you've had with ButcherBox without having the 8 years of an unsuccessful company first?
No, I don't. I mean, first of all, I learned a lot in those 8 years, and secondly, it gave me like what was important to me the first time around versus what was important to me the second time around were dramatically different. And the second time around, I took a more like gentle, heart-led approach to leading, to managing people, and to myself.
So you were like Mike 2.0 of CEO that second time around. Like there was some rougher edges, some other things, just by circumstance, and you had a chance to like kind of redo it, how you would envision yourself better than before.
For sure.
And did you ever, as it was growing, you've stayed true to this, like it's going to be bootstrap company, but I'm sure you're getting a lot of offers. People want to invest. Private equity comes. All of these sorts of things. Did you ever? And plus, you had that voice inside your head that you were describing, saying, oh, this is the time where I get the CEO who scales these kind of companies and do these kind of things. So, were you tempted at that point to sort of say, like, yeah, we've gotten to this point, but this is, sounds like many times over what you envisioned for your life, 3 years or 5 years, you've done. You can get out. There are people who run these kind of businesses and grow them. You could do a really good job hiring that. What were you telling yourself? Like, should I raise money now? Maybe this is the point where we turn this into 10x what it is in 2 years instead of 5. Did you ever think any of that? Were you tempted?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I still think about that. And so about 3 years ago, post-COVID, I went out to write like my 3-year vision of the company. And what actually really stuck with me was writing a 100-year vision for the company. And when you look at iconic food brands in this country, like the food brands that everyone knows, whether it's Hershey's or Mars or Campbell's or Tyson or Purdue, they all have a very similar makeup. Generally, they're privately held. There might be a small portion that's public, like 10% of the voting stock of Tyson is public. Everything else is private. Privately held, family-owned, multi-generational play. That is the makeup of the majority of iconic food brands in this country. And so the idea that like we're going to spin up a food brand in like 5 years and then we're just going to like, have this big thing on our hands, that might not actually be the thing that we need to build. And so where I have shifted is like, it started as a hobby. It was like, oh, it's a hobby. Started growing. I'm like, maybe we just sell this thing. Let's just flip it now. And what I've learned over time is like, okay, so meat in this country is really broken, which I'm totally happy to talk about, but meat needs a lot of care in order to like fix itself, because there's a lot of things wrong with meat, and people are waking up to that. They want better meat. In order for meat to change, there needs to be a company that doesn't have outside funding. Nobody's asking me to like pump a gross margin or figure out. I mean, we hold ourselves very accountable, but like nobody's asking for certain financial metrics because we don't have a board and we don't have people watching over us. It needs a company that's able to take a long-term view and be like, yeah, we need to change meat. And so I've kind of like gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't know, like if I was to go raise money, I think it changes the dynamic. It changes the approach. It has the potential to change the approach and the dynamic And I don't really necessarily think that that's what ButcherBox wants. And so again, it's like really tuning into what the company wants. And I did not expect ButcherBox to be as big as it is. And I believe that it's my job to basically steward it the best I can. Now, is somebody ever going to sit? If it's 100-year hold, is somebody ever going to sit in my seat? Yes. I'm not running this thing. I can't run this thing forever. It's a lot of work.
Well, it's a very Japanese approach to think in terms of 100 years, right?
Totally. But it's very freeing. It's like, so one of the things on my heart right now is worker welfare. So in slaughterhouses or in processing facilities in this country, if you remember, there was the book The Jungle that a lot of us had to read growing up. But like, conditions are not great for the worker in a processing facility. And it turns out that if you want to like go and check on worker welfare, like, how are these workers being treated? Are they allowed to vote? How much, or like how many injuries have there been? How much overtime do they have to do? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is no third-party agency in this country that will help me do that. None. I could go and figure out in like fair trade certified T-shirt in Bangladesh, no problem. Is this a sweatshop? Is it not? How are they treating people? No problem. You want to do that in this country in a processing facility? You cannot do it, and we've tried. And so something like that in a normal world would be like, oh yeah, there's no third-party agency. Like, I guess we can't do anything about that. We'll just like turn a blind eye and just keep buying from people and like not ask them questions. And we're like, you know what? Let's just build it ourselves because we got time. What I'd rather do is wake up, 3 years from now and be like, yeah, we built the first like meat processing certification for worker welfare. And like, it took us 3 years, but here we are. You can't do that if you're taking a short-term time horizon. You can, and so that's just one example of how we change meat.
Well, and also one thing is to sort of take money. Another question for you is just to exit, right? To exit. And I think the question comes up for different listeners of the show as well is, what is the opportunity cost of what I'm doing now? What else could I be doing? And that could be more time with family. That could be more, personal projects. But what happens too is a lot of founders, CEOs will say that they'd go start another company. So the question is, can you do more now with sort of what you've built and expanding? And it sounds like you found a deeper purpose in this, in a longer term vision versus just doing something else. And people, some people like, I love the thrill of starting things. I want to start something fresh and have the struggle. Or other people like, hey, I want to have impact. And maybe you have more impact where you are than doing something else.
I think the people who are dreaming of doing something else are the very people who are didn't build out a lifestyle plan. Because the reality is like, oh, you want to go work on your own things? Okay, cool. Like, I can do that. I can do that right now. You want to go invest in other things? You want to be an investor? You want to start other companies? You want to like start a side hustle? You want to start a nonprofit? You want to do this? You want to do that? You can do all that stuff. You just have a plan for it. I don't feel like to your question, if I was to sell the company tomorrow, right? It's like somebody comes along and they have a huge check and I can't ignore it. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll sell. And by the way, I'd have to believe that they could take my vision to like a better level than I can, which I would believe in with some companies. Cool. Okay, what would I do? I would erase my whiteboard and be like, what's next? And the problem I have is that the growth curve of ButcherBox is like literally world class. Like there are very few companies that have grown as fast as, even funded ones that have grown as fast as we have. And so like, what am I going to do? Start over and like try to hit that growth curve? that sounds terrifying because it's going to be very hard to go 5 million, 30 million, 100 million, 220 million. Like that is a growth curve that is basically impossible to replicate. Maybe I'm selling myself short. Who knows?
Maybe you could. Well, and then how do you talk about some kind of present day challenges, more current times? We've chatted in the past about you tend to be someone that likes to set different milestones. Sounds like sometimes you can tell the story, but you set these kind of off the cuff milestones, and you promise different things. Take us through what some of those are. Like, I think two notable ones in particular that you made and how that kind of tested you as CEO as well.
There are a number of examples of where I have made a promise to the staff, or, like we talked about earlier, making a promise to our members of a way in which we're going to behave. And I believe that my word is the most important thing I have as a CEO. Like, if you want to lead people, they need to believe that when you say something's going to happen or you're going to do something, that you're actually going to do it.
So what did you promise? And was it like an off the cuff promise? Like the idea came to you and you did it?
Yeah, totally. So one year, one of the first years, we set out, I'm a big believer in goal setting. So we had like 5 goals for the year, and we were looking at those goals, and it was like, man, if we had those goals, that'd be amazing. And I was like silly enough to say, if we hit those goals, I'm going to take you all to Mexico. And then lo and behold, at the end of the year, it's like, oh my God, we hit the goals. And I had this critical, it was, do you take them to Mexico and spend a bunch of money? There was like 20, 25 people at the time. Right. So do you fly them all to Mexico, or do you take them to a Mexican restaurant and you're like, we're in Mexico? And I was like, no, damn it. Like, we're going to take them to Mexico. And it cost us, I don't know what it cost, like $50,000 or something, because we also took people's spouses and whatnot. And it was like, no, we're going to Mexico, because that's what I said I was going to do. And I think that set up the lore of, like, when we grind and we hit numbers, like, we do cool stuff. And that, like, we got paid back for that multiple times.
The next one was more expensive, a little bit of a harder decision. What was the next one?
Yeah, the next one was in 2020. We decided that we needed to focus more on profitability. We were profitable, but we wanted to be more profitable. And so we said, hey, we need to, we had a goal to hit 20 million in profit. And we said, we need to be more profitable than that. And so I, on a whim, I was like, asked my CFO, like, are you okay if I say this? And he's like, yes. I, on a whim, said, anything above 20, we're going to split 50-50. The house takes 50 and the employees take 50. Which, maybe we'd hit 22 and we'd like give out another $1 million in profit share.
Okay, so you were thinking a little bit lower expectations than what it ended up being.
Yeah, and then COVID hit, and then we doubled, and we barely spent any money marketing, and so we had a massive amount of profit, way above what we thought. And we ended up paying every employee a profit share for $83,000. And yet again, it was like, what? You're really going to do that? I mean, my advisors of mine were like, don't do that. Don't do that. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I said it. And like, I'm a man of my word. If there's one thing about me, if I say I'm going to do something, or if I say if you do this, I'm going to do this, like, I will do it. Because, like, if you don't have that, what do you have?
Final question for you is just giving if you were listening to this show back in your prior company, and you're sitting there, you tune in, and gosh, I'm feeling tired, I'm a little bit burned out, and it was you back then, and you were listening to you yourself now. What would you tell yourself? Maybe there's some other listeners here who are just trying to figure out, do they stick with it? Do they not? Is their ladder up against the right wall because they've spent all their time trying to climb the ladder? What advice do you give yourself to Mike 1.0?
There is a lie that is pervasive in entrepreneurship right now. And that lie is that in order to succeed, you need to be on it 24/7, 365. And oftentimes I see entrepreneurs who have bad marriages, have bad health, are not around for their kids, and are like depressed. And the only thing they have going for them is grinding it out at work. And if I was to talk to the younger me, it would be a conversation around balance, and a conversation around, like, make sure that you're focusing on the things that matter while you're trying to build this thing. Like, yes, it matters, like the company matters, but make sure you're focusing on all the other things that matter. Because if you don't have those, at the end of the day, you have nothing.
By sticking to his values, Mike turned ButcherBox into a $500 million company. In a true display of leadership and vision, he refused to go down the path that promised short-term success. Mike chose the muddy road. He dreamt of a 100-year legacy, and his decision is proof of his focus on building a brand that resonates and remains member-obsessed. So what is the lesson to learn? Not all that glitters is a golden treasure. The promise of profit may be tempting, but it takes a seasoned leader to realize what's best for his pack. The jungle will try adventurers again and again, and the canopy might feel too thick to see even a few steps ahead. But it's all about going back to the core principles to choose the right path. And with that, it's case closed.